Hey guys, Miss Sewing here with a video lesson. Today our focus is on President Lyndon Johnson and the war in Vietnam. So we'll get started with our EQ or our essential question: why does LBJ get involved in the Vietnam War? So the Vietnam War is a very long war. You could spend a whole year learning about it. And we only have a few class periods, so I want you guys to come away with 3 key pieces of knowledge today. So we're going to talk about the Gulf of Tonkin incident. We're going to talk about what fighting in a jungle war looked like. And finally, we'll talk about the military draft and how it expanded during this time. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about who this guy is, LBJ. It is initials. His full name is Lyndon Baines Johnson. That's kind of a mouthful, so we limit it to the 3 letters typically. You'll see that written quite often. Lyndon Johnson is pictured here, follow the green arrow, and he actually becomes president after John F. Kennedy, or JFK, is assassinated in Dallas, November 1963. This is him taking the oath of office on the plane leaving Dallas and becoming president. So he's sort of thrust into this role. So starting with the Gulf of Tonkin incident, what do we need to know? Well, there was an incident, a situation, and President Johnson announces that the North Vietnamese, remember from our Pear Deck lesson, we talked about how the United States supported the South Vietnamese during this war. Lyndon Johnson says the North attacked our ships in a body of water called the Gulf of Tonkin. And this he used to turn around and ask Congress to give him, the president, the power to increase our military in that area to try to stop North Vietnam. He said this was like an act of terror, this was an act of aggression, and we need to fight back. But turns out years later, seems like our ships were actually working with South Vietnam to bomb the North Vietnamese, meaning we actually threw the first punch. So we used this incident to start escalating this war, saying the North Vietnamese are being aggressive and attacking us, but it turns out they were just fighting back after we hit them first. And this doesn't come to light for years later. So key point, I know that was a lot of text. Key point we should know is that President Lyndon Johnson used the Gulf of Tonkin attack, in quotation marks there, to escalate or increase the war in Vietnam. That is a cause. All right, our second point was all about fighting a jungle war. What does this look like, feel like? Well, the jungle in Vietnam made this war very hard to fight. Its geography was quite difficult to navigate. And our opponents used a tactic called guerrilla warfare. And this means a type of fighting where basically it depends on the element of surprise. So in this situation, you had people hiding in the jungle or hiding behind the trees and the foliage and jumping out and surprising U.S. troops and attacking them. That was an advantage that the jungle had. And the United States is not typically used to losing wars. So one turning point is called the Tet Offensive. And it was kind of the point where we realized that we were very far away from any sort of victory. And in fact, we were actually losing this war. Our opponents, the Viet Cong, took control of a lot of major cities in South Vietnam who we were supporting, and we're starting to see that we are not being successful. This is an image of what I mean by guerrilla warfare. This is crazy. So this, if you were up here, if you were just a little dude on top of the land, you might look out, you see a house, you see some bushes, you see some trees, but actually underneath there's this whole tunnel system. I don't know if y'all can see here, but this is water. We have a person who looks like they've jumped into this water, crawled through this underwater entrance. There's areas to pop up, cause some ruckus. There's some trenches. And this allowed people to move in the jungle without ever being seen because they were underground. Okay, so another thing to note is that the Vietnam War is the first war covered live on television. And this changes things because everybody at home can see what's happening. Like, there's really no place to hide. It's on the news every single night. And TV also shows people at home the questionable acts, sometimes straight up violent acts done by the United States. There's no way to hide it. So two notable examples there are the My Lai massacre, which was a horrific act of violence committed against unarmed civilians in Vietnam by U.S. soldiers. And the second one, or I guess there's 2 or 3 terms here, are napalm and Agent Orange. So napalm is a chemical weapon that burned people. If that chemical got on your skin, it straight up burned people, it killed people, it caused deformities and injuries that people still have today. Agent Orange was not so much directed at people, but it was directed at the environment. It's also a chemical weapon, but it was dropped to destroy the jungle cover. So the thought was if the U.S. military could destroy the jungle, while the Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese, they wouldn't have any place left to hide. That's a pretty dirty strategy, right? So people are fighting dirty. We're seeing it on television. And we'll start to see in this lesson and future lessons how that starts to change things. So key point, fighting a jungle war, well, the U.S. begins losing because of things like guerrilla warfare and the Tet Offensive. We start to realize we're not in control of the fight. And because everything is being televised, we're seeing these horrible acts on TV. Americans are starting to question the war and how we are fighting it. So let's wrap up. I told you our third key point today would be about the expansion of the military draft. And this makes sense, right? Because the U.S. was losing, and so we needed more soldiers to fight. And what Lyndon Johnson does is increase the draft. We talked about this before fall break. The draft is that lottery system based on your birthday to choose who would be going to serve in the military that year. He increased the numbers, and that ended up kind of biting him. So the Vietnam War becomes very unpopular. More people are being asked to serve. They don't want to. And it sort of ends up at a point where Lyndon Johnson looks around and realizes if he runs for president, he might not win. And so he decides he will not run again to be president. And that leads us to our final key point, which is under Lyndon Johnson, the U.S. becomes even more deeply involved in the Vietnam War, and that destroyed his presidency. It's the thing that kind of ruined him at the end, and expanding our presence in that country. So guys, I know that was a lot. Vietnam is a super complex subject, and I'm hoping that was clear. Our guided notes that you guys are hopefully following along with, make sure that those are completed before you turn them in on Google Classroom. That's going to be it for me today, guys. Thanks for listening.